Hello and welcome to Sellers Lounge. I'm your host, Pritha Dubey, an international sales trainer and founder of Success for Women, where we help organizations create sales superstars by combining the science of selling and the emotional intelligence. On this podcast, I sit across global sales experts to find answers to some of the most pressing revenue growth questions that are on the minds of business heads, CROs, and startup founders today. We are spotting the top trends and tools that are disrupting the landscape of sales. Ready to graduate from Sales 101 to Sales 1001? Stick around because class is officially in session. Jump right in. Great. So welcome everyone. And the guest for today's episode with us is Tony Cross. Is joining us all the way from Mauritius. But in today's world, in this virtual world, the world has shrunk so much that it doesn't matter where you are sitting, and you could be listening to anyone from across the world and learning from them. And I'm so happy that our guest, Tony, has agreed to be here and share his wisdom with all of us. And before we proceed into the discussion, I'll just quickly give the mic to Tony and request him to introduce himself. And what do you do, Tony? And just please tell everyone about yourself and your work.
Peter, thanks so much. And it's such a pleasure to be here. As you say, I'm sitting in one part of the world, you're sitting in a completely different part of the world, and yet we could be sitting across the table from each other. And many of the listeners could be sitting in Europe, in Asia, in Africa, in the United States. It could be anywhere. So it really is a fascinating time and in history. So it's really good to be here. Most of our work in the last 5, 6, 7 years is focused on really developing the role of the sales manager. Because as many of us would know, we spend millions on developing sales professionals, the sales people, which is important for sure. We spend millions on technology, like CRM systems, for example, which is important for sure. But probably until 5 or 6 years ago, the role of the sales manager was misunderstood. It was a senior salesperson who was perhaps the best salesperson and promoted into the job of leading a sales team and not really developed. And we would argue that the two roles, a salesperson and a sales manager, are actually very different. The one is obviously the individual contributor. My mindset is I'm in control of myself and I'm going to be a top performer. But when I'm a sales manager, I may have 5 or 6 or 10 people reporting to me that I need to coach and develop and motivate and help in order to be the best salespeople that they can be. So we saw an opportunity in the market, and our mission is to help 1 million people in this profession, this really tough job of a sales manager, frontline sales manager or sales leader, if you prefer. So that's mostly what we do. We work with salespeople, we work with sales enablement teams, and so on. But really, what we're most passionate about is helping those sales leaders and sales managers out there.
I think that's a fantastic job you are doing because this is the team that is responsible for driving the entire performance. And as we say, in a family, it is the values and the culture given to the children comes from the parents, right? So it's the seniors who are there in the system who are imbibing those values, those cultures, and the kids, if I call the salespeople as our children, they are going to look up to what you as a sales manager are doing. So if you are driving yourself in a certain way, there are high chances that your salespeople are going to also follow suit. And they're also going to be, and then there is no point in blaming and telling that, oh, I have an unproductive team. What kind of challenges do you hear when you are dealing with these sales managers? What sorts of frustrations do they speak about? I'm not talking from the organization side, what's they are expecting from them, but more from these individuals, because I know they're somewhere, sandwiched in the middle. There are these the top management who are expecting certain kind of things from them, and then they have the to balance, these subordinates, the salespeople, the dynamic force, um, always restless. So this balancing could be a bit of a challenge for them. But what is it that they share, their frustrations?
So their frustrations are definitely what you described. They're in the middle. They're in this middle between the business leaders and the people that are servicing our customers. And so what they often will share with us is, first of all, that they're not clear on the strategy. And they say, but is it my strategy, or is it the business strategy? Or perhaps I've got a sales leader who's supposed to give me a sales strategy. So that's the first part, maybe clarity. The second thing they complain about, or talk to us about, help, please help us with this, is really around the people element. Because some people, need more coaching than other people. Some people are more experienced. Perhaps they've been doing the job for 20 years, but they're quite resistant to change. And as we know that the world is changing, so how do I work with let's call it the more experienced salespeople compared to the new salespeople? And how do I put together a plan? And many sales managers say they are called into so many meetings, so many discussions around operational issues, around business issues, that takes them away from their primary function. So we would argue we have a framework where we say the job of a sales manager is to get the number by executing the strategy through their people who drive customer value. And the importance there is it's not a sales manager's job to sell. Now, of course, a sales manager needs to speak to customers. They need to deal with escalations. But often sales managers are pulled into sales, either by their salespeople or by their organizations. They're pulled into non-sales activities. And that always comes as a trade-off or a cost against perhaps coaching one of their salespeople. So time management, I don't like to call it time management, but more priority management is a continuous struggle for most of the sales managers we work with. And then other challenges around finding good salespeople. What does the recruitment process look like? Making sure they remain motivated in very difficult times. And as all of us have come through the last few years, it's been really tough on salespeople. They've had to adapt, and they've had to become used to things like virtual selling. So the sales managers have to keep their team motivated. And then you touched on something so important around culture. So as you mentioned, if you're a father or a mother or a parent or a grandparent, you set the tone of the culture for the family or your community. And it's no different in a sales team. So as a manager, I have to establish this culture. As a sales leader, I've got to build the right culture in the sales team. And I mean, we teach this. So we talk about things like accountability. How do we hold people accountable, not only to results, but also accountable to activity, accountable to a healthy pipeline. So we have a framework we call the expectations review, which is really about saying, what do I need to do every week, every month, or every quarter as a sales professional? And I can be held accountable to that, because that's where performance comes from. So many challenges, as you can see, ranging from culture through recruitment, through how do we keep salespeople motivated, and then you have the pressure, as all of us in sales know, that if you're hitting the number, you're hitting your target, your annual quota, things are good. But as soon as you are behind, the pressure is just immense, and it seems to be in that middle that the pressure is felt the most. So hopefully there was a long answer to a short question, but that's typically what sales managers share with us as to their top challenges are.
And I think even more than the long answer, Tony, I think it is true that the responsibilities that, the frustrations that they're coming out, the responsibilities are actually a long list for them. It is not a very short list. It is not just that, oh, let me just drive the salespeople and let me just get the number. As you mentioned, the different hats that the sales manager has to wear. Sometimes they have to be a coach, and it's a very important thing. And probably I'll just come to that part also, that how are these people developing themselves as a coach? Because that is also one aspect that they need to constantly be involving themselves into. Then there is this aspect of accountability, ownership, like you said, priority management. There are new ideas also that they need to think. That is the creating, designing the sales strategies for the team, figuring out where is the friction in my entire sales process and where can I have the right forces, figuring all that stuff out. And I think somewhere they get very overwhelmed because they feel that where do I have the time to do all that stuff? And yes, I think one of the challenges that kind of stops them, I feel, from my personal experience and of having worked with these sales leaders and coached them, is this reverse delegation that they get into, that you will delegate the work, and then the the delegatee will come up and say that, oh boss, this is, I'm not understanding it, I've got stuck here. And then that moment, instead of kind of coaching or mentoring that person to become better, because there is a quota, because there's a deadline, because they need to achieve something. So what they end up doing is they said, okay, let it be on my desk only, I will manage it. And somewhere they kill that time in that process, and they miss the opportunity of coaching the right people and grooming. And plus they have to groom the successors also for themselves and maintain the culture. Yes, it's a long list of responsibility, and which also therefore highlights or emphasizes the importance of why the work that you do is so very critical for the organizations. Because yes, this people in the middle, if they are not emotionally taken care of, and they are not physically taken care of, and they are not functionally and competency wise everywhere, if they are not taken care of, it can directly hit the bottom line and the top line, of course, because the salespeople are then going to just follow what the instructions they have been given. How often do you find that the sales leaders, or how confident do you find them when it comes to placing their point firmly with the top management?
Obviously, that it all depends on the person and the organization, but certainly that's an area where sales managers have to be stronger. We often share with sales managers how they can, manage upwards, because it is so important. And I think what's happened is many sales leaders and business leaders, perhaps they were in sales, but 20 years ago, and that's a different world. And perhaps they can say, Tony, when I was the sales manager, it was quite simple. When I was a salesperson, I really can't understand why your team is not getting results, because when I was there. And I think the world has changed, and the senior leaders are not always, completely, in touch, let's call it, with really what's happening at the level of a salesperson, or certainly at a level of a sales manager. And as you said, Pritha, I've got many hats on as a sales manager. I have to be a mentor, I have to be a coach, I have to be a teacher, I have to be a counselor sometimes. I also have to be a manager and a leader. So a manager has to hold people accountable, but a leader also has to inspire and motivate and, be that support structure. And all of these roles take energy. So what we have seen, recently, but even prior to COVID, is sales managers' energy levels are probably lower than ever before. because they are just swamped with the pressure, and they are swamped with this long list of responsibilities, as you mentioned. And sometimes they are feeling overwhelmed. So what we always start with is we start with, okay, let's understand your environment, and let's understand what you think your role is compared to perhaps the definition that we use. And let's start breaking that down into, let's call it boxes, and then we can help you. For example, you mentioned they miss out on coaching opportunities because it takes too long, or it's much quicker for me to just solve the problem or phone the customer. And it's true. That is definitely the most efficient way. It takes, I can easily get on a phone as a sales manager, maybe close the deal or have a good conversation about value for one of my salespeople, but it's not effective, because the next time I'm going to have to do the same thing, and the time after that. So coaching is so important, but we don't allocate enough time for coaching. So when we talk to sales managers and we say to them, we teach them that there's 9 coaching conversations that you can have. For example, a pipeline review, or a deal review, opportunity review, or an expectations review, or an account review. There's 9 of those conversations. And each of them are slightly different, but they follow the same framework. It's about asking questions, leading somebody to their own insights. When you do that effectively and within a cadence, so we say to our sales managers, every week you should be coaching at, one-on-one, doing one-on-one coaching with each of your salespeople. Now, if you have a big sales team, maybe that's every second week, but you should have a standing coaching slot in your calendar that you should be coaching. That doesn't mean you don't coach ad hoc or maybe in field with a person. Those are coaching opportunities too. And all the sales managers that we've worked with, 2-3 years afterwards, they let us know that suddenly their sales team has started to perform, and they don't know why. And we ask them, what did you do differently? We don't expect everything we taught you that you've applied perfectly. They always come back to coaching. They say, Tony, the one thing that we've got right in the sales team is I have regular coaching conversations where I'm not telling the person, I'm asking the person, and it's a good coaching conversation. And we always say, if there's one thing that you get right in a sales team, it's coaching. And then just last comment is, as a salesperson, when I was in sales, because I started my career in sales and then I became a sales manager and then a sales leader. But when I was in sales, I also had a sales manager who spent time coaching me. But at the time, I didn't realize. At the time, I was thinking, this is just time in my calendar that I can't afford. I want to be in front of the customers. But once I understood the value that I was getting from that sales manager coaching me, what a big difference it made. Then it was the one thing in my week that I would never postpone, I would never cancel, because I would have that alone time, that dedicated, individual time where my manager actually asked me difficult questions, but it really helped my brain, understand what I was doing and what I could do to improve. So from a sales person point of view, I've been through this journey. When we talk to salespeople of managers that we've been working with, that's exactly what they tell us. They say something is different. We can't work out what, but if we really, really analyze it, it's that one-on-one coaching. And at first it was a bit weird and it was a bit unusual, because I was more used to my manager just telling me what to do. And now my manager was asking me questions like, what do I think I should be doing? What do I think I should be doing regarding this pipeline or this opportunity? And what a difference it makes. So I think for the salespeople perhaps listening to this recording, it'll be useful for you to just reflect on what coaching that you are receiving. And also that if you are being offered coaching, to really see it in a different way, to actually reach out and say, I want that feedback. I want to know how I'm doing and how I can improve. So I welcome that coaching. That's so important for salespeople, to be open to the learning and the coaching.
And at this point, I would also like to give a a caution to all the sales managers and sales leaders who are listening to it. Many a times you are under this belief that you know what is coaching, because somewhere you feel that sitting with the sales your team and telling them where they are wrong and giving them a feedback and guiding them on how they should be dealing the next negotiation, or how they should be talking to another client. And you think that that is what coaching is, like Tony was mentioning, and he was repeatedly saying these two things. One is telling, and the other is asking questions. And you will need some coaching yourself to learn that aspect, because if you do it wrong, then yes, you're going to discard that entire process and say that, oh, coaching doesn't work. But it's a proven thing world over that coaching is one process. If you follow dedicatedly, it is going to bring about a great change, a huge jump in the motivation levels of your team members, the accountability of your team members, the ownership of your team members, and therefore the performance of the team member. But do not assume that you already know what is coaching. Take help from mentors like Tony, myself, and there are many more in your region also. Take help from them, learn what is coaching. And also, in the process, do also prepare coaches under you, because many of you could probably be managing large teams, right, Tony? They probably also may say that, oh, I have 200 people under me. Now, it can practically be a bit difficult to kind of go ahead and coach all the 200 people. There are concepts. You don't really have to get into a coaching certification to understand all those processes, but prepare your one downs also, groom them so that they are also in the process of becoming a good leader like yourself. Um, now
Yeah, I
this,
mean, I think that I sorry to
I
interrupt you. I
please
think
carry on. Carry on.
that is such good advice, because we often hear that leaders should be creating more followers, but actually leaders should be creating more leaders. So I love what you're saying. If you're a coach and you have a big team, look for the senior people. Perhaps they would like to one day be a sales lead, or even not. Some of that peer-to-peer coaching is so powerful. And the other thing you mentioned was you can go on a 7-day coaching course. You can go on neuro leadership coaching, and they're all great. They're all great programs. And as a lifelong manager or leader, I would recommend all of those programs. But actually, a practical coaching approach is really about asking questions in order for the person to come to their own realization of something. We do lots of work around a framework from Dr. David Rock from the Neuro Leadership Institute. It's called the iceberg model, and he says if you can work with people with great questions or great frameworks, that will impact the way they think. Therefore, it'll impact the way they feel. Therefore, it'll impact the way they behave, and ultimately, their results will improve. So we work with these questions. So if you would like to be a coach, start with just writing a short list of 5 to 7 questions that you're not going to jump in with the answer. You're just going to ask the question and then maybe explore a little bit. We use a framework, we call it the ICE framework. So it's identify, clarify, and explore. So we ask some questions to identify the issue. We ask some questions to clarify why the source, the reason, the gap, the reason for this issue. And then we always finish with some explore questions, which are exploring what actions should I go and take. So it's actually a fairly easy, method. And then the last point is, if you're a great salesperson, the one thing we would really understand that you probably do well is you probably ask great questions of your customers. You ask those in-depth, great, questions to really uncover the needs and uncover the challenges and the problems and what outcomes they desire. That's such a good skill for your transition into management, because then you can continue asking great questions as a coach instead of being a salesperson. Yeah, so that would be some advice if you are wanting to make that transition into management. Practice your coaching skills, which is really questioning skills, because that will definitely help you become a great sales manager.
Yes, and all the sales leaders who are listening, this is indeed one of the finest advice that you are receiving right now, and I just hope that you pay heed to this advice and you work on it. Um, Also remember, there is something that, Tony, that just crossed my mind when you're talking about this. See, uh, mostly that is what in organizations happen. We promote people internally, right? So you are right in saying that these sales managers once upon a time used to be great sales people. At the same time, something that I and my firm works very strongly on is developing the science of selling. Why we say the science of selling is because you and I are two different personalities. Our styles are very different. One of you, one of us could be a lot more extrovert than the other. One of us could be a lot more comfortable with the small talks, or breaking the ice, or even the negotiation part, or being direct with the customer. Some of us as salespeople, we are shy in even directly asking for the order. We kind of take them to that level and then wait. Okay, maybe the customer is on their own going to tell me that, okay, take the order. So we are all very different, unique personalities. And therefore, when we have been, and as sales managers, they should remember this, that when you have been a salesperson, you have leveraged your personality also to become a good salesperson. But your sales team member is a very different personality altogether. So when you are telling them most of the time that do this, do that, you are telling them from your perspective of how you have been as a salesperson. It is not necessary that the other person would be comfortable following whatever you are telling. And if you are at times feeling that you are stuck somewhere, that, I've been telling my team member to do this, do that, and yet they are not doing it, you need to understand that it could be because that is not their personality. And that is the reason, again, why coaching helps. Because here, you're not telling them anything, you are asking them. Like the model that you mentioned, the framework that you mentioned, the first part of identifying who they are, what is their personality, and then probably asking questions of letting them on their own figure out what is the right style that is going to work for them. And that is the beauty of coaching. It follows a science, it follows a psychology, and that is when it is your results are then not random, because now you are very logically uh, taking every approach in your sales method. So that is something that again helps why you should be knowing how to coach people. So yes, Tony, you want to add something on this?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. You've highlighted such an important point in that often sales managers will go into the field. They'll go to see a customer with their salesperson, and they'll say, just do what I do. And as you say, I'm different to my salesperson, and he or she is different to me. So when they try and be me in a sales call, if I'm the manager, and it doesn't work, then they go, oh, that didn't work, so I must be useless, or maybe this coaching thing is not working. So that's number one. Number two is so many sales managers think they're coaching when they're having a sales team meeting. And I've got 10 people, I've got 20 people in a room, and I'm not coaching. And we often say to them, that's a sales team meeting. Very important to do, but it's not coaching. Because if I'm coaching and my style is a certain way, my communication style is a certain way, then some people in the room are going, oh, that was amazing. I really learned a lot, and I'm motivated to go out there and perform in a better way. But the rest of the room are going, I don't think that would work for me. So sometimes sales managers think that's coaching, and we say, No, we're talking about an individual coaching session, and you're so right. Because I'm working now with you compared to John, compared to Sally, very different. So I need a development plan that's different. I need a coaching plan that's different. Maybe it's a frequency. So perhaps I need to be spending 30 minutes with Tony around a major deal
Mm.
and coaching what we would call an opportunity review.
Mm.
But then I'm just going to spend time with Janet around 2 accounts
Mm.
or maybe pipeline.
Mm.
But when we try and do the one size fits all and
Yeah.
say, okay, this month I'm doing pipeline coaching, or this month I'm doing forecast coaching, or this month I'm doing account planning, so therefore I'm doing account coaching. That's not the right approach either. So it's very specific to each person, because leadership is that. Leadership is, I need to lead you and I need to lead this person. Here we've got into the strange view on leadership where we think everything has to be equal. And
Yeah.
what we say is everything has to be fair. It
Yeah.
doesn't have to be equal. What we mean by this is you're different. You've been here for 10 years. You've got a certain level of experience. You've got a different customer portfolio to the next person. Therefore, it can't be that I coach you equally. What I need to do is I need to treat you the same, but I need to handle you differently, if that makes sense. And with fairness. That's what we always, one of our key philosophies that we're trying to teach is, if your target is 10 million, it doesn't mean John's target has to be 10 million, because John and Fred are two different people. It just needs to be fair to both people. And sometimes I think sales managers struggle with this because of the organization or because the pressures they're under. We rush targets and we rush strategy and so on. And we say, just keep it fairly simple, but make sure you think it through on an individual basis. Hopefully that's making sense.
Yeah.
Really we have to teach people as leaders, as sales managers, treat people, as individuals rather than just say, okay, I'm doing coaching in a sales team meeting, or here's a story. The other day I was observing a team meeting. It was a virtual one of one of our sales managers.
Mm.
And the sales manager, they were behind on their target. And he was basically lecturing the whole group of, I think there were about 8 or 9 salespeople, lecturing them about missing targets and underperformance. And then afterwards, he asked me for some feedback. And I said to, okay, is everybody, missing their targets? And he said, no, only 2 people. So I said, okay, but why didn't you go talk to those 2 people? Because he said, but I'm sure I got the message across. And I said, no, when the people are leaving the room, those 2 people don't even know you were talking to them. And the other people are going, why are you talking to me, Tony? Because I'm on my target. Why are you lecturing me? So we often have forgotten this real skill about leading or managing people as individuals. And I think that's something that we need to all get back, and not hide behind the sort of, generic team approach.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that also says, another competency that many of these sales managers probably lack, or maybe they lack. That's the reason why they hesitate. And that is about giving feedback. They really do not know how to give the right feedback. And that is why probably they utilize these team meetings to give out a general feedback, hoping that it will reach the person for whom it was intended. But what actually they're doing is they're kind of avoiding giving that one-on-one feedback, because maybe in the past or in the present, the way they give feedback, it's very direct, or they're just saying, you don't do this, you don't do that, and this is not right, or that is not right. And often salespeople, and this is something that has always I have seen in salespeople, the way they have been given a feedback, in salespeople's mind, they just hear it from one ear and throw it out from the other ear. They just don't pay
Yeah.
heed to the feedback given to them, and that's because of the way the feedback is given. It sounds more like a criticism of the work that they are doing. It's not an empowering feedback. It's not something that you are giving that makes the person feel so empowered that they on their own feel like working on the change that you are suggesting. They feel happy to work on the change that you are suggesting. Instead, they feel, what do you know? We are on the field. We are going out. We are slogging. We are meeting the customer. We are having to face their anger and all the aggressions that the customers show to us. You are sitting in your cabin and you're just telling us that you do this, you do that, and all that stuff, which is also true. And that is where the emotional intelligence of the sales leader is so important, to be emotionally intelligent towards the people. And if you are, you will exactly know what to say and how to say when you are giving the feedback.
Yeah, quite right. I mean, giving negative feedback is difficult. So, probably 10 or 12 years ago, I read this little article around feedback, and they said, here's a quick framework: start, stop, continue.
Mm.
And it's so powerful. So if I'm going to give feedback, I would suggest you start doing this, you stop doing this, and you continue doing this. Where continue is actually what the person's doing quite well. So what we do is we say to sales managers that you really have to have three parts. Number one is you have to observe. So you need to either ask great questions, so it's as if you were observing, or you need to be in the field to actually observe, not from what I've heard or hearsay. Number two is you have to give motivation. So it's so important, because if it's just you did this wrong and you did this wrong and you forgot to do that, then like you say, it's in one ear and out the other ear. And then the third component is you must give developmental feedback. And the best way to do that is to ask questions.
Yeah.
So, Tony, what do you think you did well in that call? What do you think you're doing well in terms of this opportunity? Where do you think you could improve? What else could you do differently? And there's many questions you can ask, but you're hoping that the person you're coaching goes, you know what, the one thing I can do is this, and I think I could have done more of that, or I can go take action here. And that's great coaching, because you've given them developmental feedback without demotivating them. And like you say, you've used your EQ. Um, you realize that the person's going through a tough period of, maybe they've got issues at home, or they're going through, let's say, a divorce, or their child is sick, or something's happening in their life. You have to take that into consideration. So you have to have that EQ for sure.
Yeah.
And then I don't want to say it's simple, but it's a lot easier to then say, well, what do you think? What do
Yeah.
you think?
Yeah.
Now, sometimes you're going to be coaching someone where the person says, no, I think I'm brilliant and I'm excellent and I couldn't have done it any better. Then a great question to ask is, okay, that's fantastic. On a scale of 1 to 10, where 1 is completely, I didn't do something or I got it completely wrong, and 10 is absolutely perfect, where would you say you are? Now, most people, even when they were very confident and said, no, I really did well, they're going to say something like, oh, I think it's an 8.5, maybe a 9. And then you have the opportunity to say, okay, excellent. What do you base that 9 on? No, I did this and I did this and that happened and I addressed it like this. Okay, fantastic. What is the one thing you could do to move yourself from a 9 to a 10? And that's immediately now some developmental feedback. Now, if the person says, no, I think I was a 6, what's the one thing you could do to move yourself to a 7 or an 8? And if the person said, if I'm honest, I think I'm a 3 out of 10 in terms of that question, what is the one thing you could do to move yourself from a 3 to a 5 or a 6? And then as soon as they say, I think I could do this, or I could have done that better, then a great question follow-up is, what can I do to help? What can I do to help you practice that, or role play it, or put something in place where you can get this right? And that's great coaching. It doesn't have to be more difficult than that.
Yeah.
And I think, Preeta, in this world that is changing so fast, I mean, you talk about VUCA and you talk about, yeah, we have to be agile and we're selling in these difficult conditions and we have economies that are in turmoil and we have, wars going on and
Yeah.
viruses hopefully not coming back and we have all these changes. Sales managers are so important to this, to the, I think you put it so well, to the mental health of themselves, but also of their team.
Yeah.
Um, and there are certainly things that they can be doing better
True.
in terms of, setting clear boundaries, making sure there's a good discipline in their team, a good culture in their team. And then from a salesperson point of view,
Mm.
it's a difficult job. Sometimes I joke and in the job of sales, sometimes every month you're starting at zero again. It's a tough job. We understand this. So how
Yeah.
are we working together as the salespeople, the sales managers in a high performing team and supporting each other through this?
I think sales leaders, if you're listening to this, these are some pearls of wisdom that has come your way, and kind of a complimentary session or a free session that you've just got on how you can be better as a coach. Tony has just laid down some beautiful questions for you. And if you've heard this, if you've taken notes, if you begin also with these questions, it's going to show a good change in your own behavior and also in the behavior of your team members. And something for you to remember as sales leaders is that in order for coaching or to be a success, and you have to be genuinely interested in your team member. You cannot sit with a team member with a very self-serving mindset that I am sitting there because I want my KPIs to be achieved. You have to sit there with the mindset that I want to grow this person. I want this person to grow in life. And when you sit there with that mindset, you will find yourself genuinely curious to know about the other person, genuinely interested to help the other person. Otherwise, if you are sitting there with a very self-serving, my KPI, my numbers, and my growth, then the artificiality in your conversation or the selfishness is somehow going to show, and that doesn't present you as an ethical leader. And that probably will, I'll come to that aspect now, Tony. Ethical, being ethical in sales, and we are, all of us are trying very hard. UI and all the sales experts around the world are now working very hard towards changing this bad name that sales has got. And the sales leaders have a very important responsibility, a very critical responsibility on that part of driving ethical selling. So how do you suggest, and what are some things that the sales leader should keep in mind? Because at times they do reach a spot where they're stuck on an unethical decision, or a dilemma of should I or should I not? What should I do in a situation? One side there is a KPI, and another side probably there is an unethical demand, maybe from a customer side, or from somewhere there's an unethical demand. Now, what should a sales leader do?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, and as you say, there is definitely a movement around really selling with noble purpose. So if you read the book, I think it's by Lisa McLeod, Selling with Noble Purpose. She's probably the expert on this topic. That is a great place to start. Is what is my purpose? I'm going to make sure that my sales team sells with noble purpose. In other words, if we're not the right provider for this particular customer, but we can still sell them a solution that's going to be okay, it's actually good for you to walk away and say to the customer, you know what? We are not the perfect solution for this situation for you as a customer. But that's difficult to do when you have the quarterly numbers and the targets on your back, and perhaps you're behind in the number. But that's truly selling with noble purpose. There's another expression that comes from the book and from others. Selling won't help, but helping will sell. So as a sales manager, your mantra, your team culture needs to be, we are out there to help customers. And if we help enough customers, we're going to sell enough products for us to meet our target and then get onto the award stage. It's not the other way around. It's not saying I just need to drive the numbers. And it's so interesting. I've been to some sales conferences where there's awards evening, and the top performing sales manager, the top performing sales people are not necessarily the right ones. And the audience knows it, and we know it if we've been working with the organization, but they happen to have got the highest number, the highest percentage of target. And I said to a CEO quite recently, I said, for me, getting the number is important. So we never want to say that you shouldn't be achieving. But as a sales manager, your top performing, your sales manager of the year award should go to the sales manager who has developed their people the most. So if they were a 60% and they're now 90%, but the other person they were 102%, now they're 108%, and they're getting the sales manager of the year. I'm saying I don't think that's right. It doesn't feel right. So there's all of these things happening. Ethics is a very interesting thing, and integrity is a very interesting thing, because sometimes we think it's black and white, it's right or wrong, but it's often not. It's those gray areas. Selling in Africa, for example, many people I've heard this, but it's Africa. That there's this, whether it's a bribe or it's something to sweeten the deal to some middleman. My view is simple. That is unethical behavior. It's probably illegal, but even if it's not illegal, it's unethical, or it's questioning your integrity. And then the last thing I can say on this point is, how do you know? How do you really know if something's ethical or low on integrity or high? And a great piece of advice I heard once was, imagine if it's a news headline, and you see the news in newspaper, and the news headline is factually representing what you did. How would you feel reading it the following day? And that actually gives you this uneasy feeling to go, oh, maybe it's not quite ethical, and so on. What I am pleased to say is that there is definitely this movement away from selling like the Wolf of Wall Street. And unfortunately, even Barack Obama, in the lead up to him winning the presidential election, actually spoke about salespeople in a very negative way. And I took offense. I was going, but hold on, not all salespeople are like that. So I think, Pritha, my view is that every sales manager, every sales leader, every salesperson has a job to do to shift the perception of this as a profession, where we need to sell with noble purpose. We need to be super prepared, super professional, doing what's best for the customer. Obviously, we want to align the customer's outcome with our outcome, of course, but doing what's best for the customer. And if we do this as a profession, I'll be very happy, because I believe this is an extremely important profession that all sales professionals need to be proud of. So I'm hoping that's answered your question.
Yeah, absolutely. And what the benefit of this is, even if somebody is stuck at that place, that to do or not to do, in a very Shakespearean my thing, if you were to say, if you're stuck there, understand one thing, the why you should do it. Rather, it's because you are going to reduce the resistance from your customers. The customers can feel it, that you're being true, you're being genuine, you're being transparent, you're being ethical. The reason why there is so much of customer resistances, and probably your sales team goes through a lot of objection, is because your customer is also sitting with that perception that these people, probably 80% of the things that they are going to say is a bluff, or they are going to probably not be mentioning all the right things, or they are probably not being absolutely transparent with me. And that is the reason they say that I have to think about it, or let me go and meet up with some other vendors, or some other people who are doing it. Then they go and meet up with a competitor. But in sales, more than the product, the customer has to like the salesperson. If they like the salesperson, if they trust the salesperson, automatically the trust develops for the product. Now, you as a leader, if you are able to develop all your salespeople as ethical sellers, it's natural that the customers will sense it. They are going to feel it. The resistance will automatically come down. The numbers will automatically happen. So it's the win-win situation that we have been talking about, we have been reading about, learning about. You probably go to a lot of trainings that teach us what is a win-win, how to do win-win negotiation. But this is the win-win negotiation. You give them what they are looking for, and you be true to what you are, or what you can deliver and you cannot deliver. And that kind of, I think it bridges every gap. Even if there are slight gaps, the customer on their own are going to say that it's all right. I'm probably fine with that gap happening, but you only come and deliver this for me, isn't it?
I love what you're saying, because it is a win-win. If you look at the research about why customers buy, there's a big portion around the sales experience, which is exactly what you're saying. I feel I can trust this person. I like this person. They definitely are more transparent than what I've been used to. And that's actually more important than the product or the service or the brand, or even the price. But often we'll go, no, a customer buys on price, or a customer buys on quality, which is the product. Those are factors. But the research is showing that the most important is the sales experience. So I love the way you put that. It's actually a win-win. If you're acting with integrity and selling with noble purpose, you're going to differentiate yourself straight away. And as you say, then the customer is more understanding. If you don't, answer the phone in 13 seconds, or you don't get the proposal in one day turnaround time, they're gonna go, that's okay. I can wait a second day, because I trust, Tony or John or whoever, because, and I mean, you summarized it well. They can feel it,
You can
and
feel it.
that's the reality, is they can actually feel that this salesperson is not just in it for themselves or for the commission.
Yeah.
So definitely, I mean, I love that, and it's a dream I have to have more salespeople and more sales managers acting in that way, rather than being the exception, as in some cases.
Yeah.
Um,
So the coaching that we do at Success Vitamin is we combine the science of selling with emotional intelligence, so that we are able to produce more, the salespeople, we are able to develop sales intelligence in them. And that is exactly the motive with which we have designed this entire coaching program, and the developmental program is so that we are able to make every salesperson emotionally intelligent, who's aware of their own emotions, who is aware of the other person's perspectives also, and they're working with that empathy, they're working with personal integrity, they're working with ethics, so that overall the entire sales experience for both the parties, for the seller and the buyer, is is such a beautiful experience for them, that it leads to a long-term relationship, um, which then leads to the buyer being a lifelong advocate of you. And that is probably the most ideal state to be in. One last question, and probably one last wisdom that we'll ask from you for our sales leaders is, what should they be prepared for? What should they prepare themselves on to be ready for the future? What is it that they should be, because they need to look forward as well, right? So yes, they are currently going through certain uncertainty, certain volatility, and they're adapting to the situation. But what about if we have to ask them to be proactive. What should they be proactively preparing themselves on? What is about to knock at their door that they should be aware of, they should be prepared of, and prepare their team as well?
Yeah, I think two things that I would mention. The first is technology, and obviously we have, artificial intelligence, AI, and Chat GPT. That's going to turn the sales profession upside down and inside out. Not because it's doing anything necessarily, but it's going to be confusion. And there's going to be this concept of social selling and technology selling and all sorts of things that they're going to be bombarded with messages, and it's going to be a new thing and a new fad and a new fashion. I think that they have to be aware of. Our advice around technology is just look at it very sensibly rather than irrationally and panic that this is coming at us and it's going to replace the job of the salesperson, and content marketing is going to be completely different. It's not really true. But also don't be ignorant that it's not going to have an impact. It's certainly going to have an impact. So that's the one. The second thing I would say is the longer the emerging workforce happens, we all know that the young workforce need to be managed in a different way. They're going to be moving jobs more often. They're not going to be as stable as perhaps some of their parents were, when working. So they're going to have to manage people. I don't want to say more sensitively, but probably with slightly different boundaries. And what I can share on this is the young emerging generation. I speak with someone who's got two daughters who are now going into the workplace. They actually want boundaries. They say they don't, but when you put boundaries in place and you manage them with individuality and you manage them with respect, they actually love the fact that they've got boundaries. It's when they don't have boundaries that they drift and they feel lost. So that would be some advice, is to really be looking out for that as the composition of our sales team changes, into 2024 and beyond.
That's some solid advice, Tony, and I hope that all the listeners have taken note of this. That these are the two areas that you need to be proactively looking out for, these two areas. And yes, the second one, technology is already, you probably are already doing something. If you're not, then you're going to get very late to the party then. But yes, the generational gap that you're going to be facing now, you need to really buckle up and start working on yourself. And you can't be saying that this is how I used to do in my time. That time is gone now. We need to adapt to the changing time, and this is the changing time. The younger generation that is flooding the workforce now, you will have a lot of these people with a very different mindset, and you should know how to deal with the mindset. And one advice that I would like to leave you with is, if you are not already doing it, get adept with data analysis, because that is going to give you a lot of fodder of how you can plan your strategy. It is going to give you a great insight into your customer's mind and their purchasing behavior. And therefore, it will help you create good strategies for your team members, so that then they are not just randomly knocking at doors, but they are knocking at very targeted doors, which is going to then lead to success in their sales numbers. So thank you so much, Tony, for coming into this session. It was lovely chatting with you, and what amazing suggestions and advices and anecdotes you've shared for the sales leaders. I think all our listeners are going to be eternally thankful to you for the generosity with which you have shared the tips, the techniques, the methods. You've not, held back your knowledge or the things that you are already doing. You probably charge for all these advice that you give to an organization. And thank you so much. that you're so kind that you've shared this with all our audiences here. And I'm sure that they would be very, very grateful to listening to you. Thank you so much for
Yeah,
that.
thank you so much. And I've really enjoyed the conversation. So thanks to you, and thanks to anyone watching this podcast.
And if they have to connect with you, how do they contact you?
Either on our website, which is www.growthmattersintl.com, or via email tonyc@growthmattersintl.com. And I promise I will reply to any emails that I get.
Awesome. So great and nice having you here. And thank you to everyone who has been tuned in till now.